I used to work night maintenance at an old hospital in Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and after a while, I kind of liked the solitude to see at night. A hospital feels like another world. No traffic, no noise, just the low hum of generators, the occasional beeping from machines that are still connected, and that faint smell of disinfectant that never really goes away. My job was simple. Keep the place running, fix broken lights, replace filters, check the boiler room, keep the air system from freezing during winter. The hospital had been around since the 1950s. It was massive, long hallways, cone ceilings, dozens of wings that had been closed off after newer hospitals were built nearby. Parts of it were being prepped for demolition, but the basement, that place was older than everything above it, built back when medical waste and records were stored underground, behind heavy steel doors that hadn't been opened in decades. Even before my first shift, people warned me. The basement's bad luck, one nurse said, half joking. Things moved down there, another whispered. I brushed it off as night shift superstition. Every workplace has its ghost stories. But one night, March 4th, 2014, I stopped laughing. It started a little after 2 a.m. I was in the main electrical room, checking voltage output, when my radio crackled. Maintenance, you there? We've got flickering lights on B wing, basement level. It was Jenna, one of the few overnight nurses. She sounded uneasy. I sighed. The basement lights were on old wiring, and they glitched all the time. Copy that, I said. On my way. Grabbed my flashlight, the big industrial kind, took the service elevator down. The doors opened with that deep metallic groan, and a cold wave of air hit me. Even though it was early spring, it felt freezing down there. The corridor stretched ahead, long, narrow, and lined with old pipes. Most of the lights were flickering. Some glowed orange instead of white. Others buzzed like angry bees. I started walking. Every step echoed back to me, perfect rhythm, until one of the echoes didn't match my pace. I stopped. The echo didn't. For 1 second. I swore I heard a second set of footsteps just behind me, soft, dragging. I spun around. Empty hallway. My radio hissed again. Jenna's voice. Hey, everything okay down there? I pressed the button. Yeah, just checking breakers. But my voice didn't sound steady. The longer I stayed, the more wrong it felt. I reached the breaker box at the far end. Every switch was fine. None tripped. None overloaded. But the hallway lights kept flickering, one by one, as if something invisible was walking beneath them. I stood still, watching. The lights dimmed from left to right, moving toward me. My stomach dropped. Then the motion sensor lights clicked on, one by one, following the same direction, as if something was physically moving closer. I froze. Those sensors were supposed to be off. I reached for my radio again. Control, did you reactivate motion sensors in the basement? No answer, just static. I tried again. Nothing but static, and a faint whisper under it. It almost sounded like breathing. I told myself I was imagining things, the kind of paranoia that hits after too many night shifts. Still, I started walking back, faster this time. Halfway down the corridor, my flashlight flickered, then went out completely. Great, I muttered. I tapped it once, twice, nothing. Then, from behind me, I heard the sound, a light bulb popping. I turned. The last working light above the far doorway had burst. Glass scattered across the floor, and in that brief flash before everything went dark, I saw a figure standing by the boiler room door, just a silhouette. Still, watching, my brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a coat rack or equipment shadow, but I'd been in that hallway dozens of times. There was no rack there. When I blinked, the shape was gone. I kept moving, counting each step toward the elevator. I just wanted to get back to the main floor. But when I reached the end of the hallway, The elevator doors were wide open and the lights inside were off. A cold draft came out, smelling like burnt wires and rust. Then my radio came alive again, but this time, the voice wasn't Jenna's dot. It was deeper, slower. "Where are you going?" I dropped the radio. It clattered across the tiles. I ran. I didn't care where, just away, through a side door, up the emergency stairs, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. When I burst onto the first floor, I slammed the door shut and locked it. The second I did, the stairwell light behind the door flickered once, twice, then went dark when I found Jenna at the nurse's desk. She looked terrified. "Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded, trying to catch my breath. "What's wrong with the intercom system? I keep hearing weird voices through it." She blinked. "We don't use the intercom anymore. It's been off since the remodel started." That was the moment something clicked. The voice over my radio, the whispering, static, the way the lights followed me. None of it should have been possible. We decided to check the system logs in the TEP maintenance office. Every time a light flickers or a sensor triggers, it leaves a TIME STAMP at 2:47 a.m. Motion sensors in the basement activated in sequence from the far wall all the way up to the elevator. The log even listed which ones went off, but the final entry said something that still haunts me. Manual override. Presence confirmed. But Lion wasn't part of the software. There was no manual override option, and no one, not Jenna, not me, not security, had access to add one. The next day, I came in early and went down to check again in daylight. The basement looked completely normal. No broken bulbs, no shattered glass, no burnt smell. But when I walked past the boiler room, I noticed something new on the metal door. A handprint, faint and black, like soot. The fingers were long, longer than normal. I took a photo and sent it to my supervisor. He called me 10 minutes later and said, "That area's off limits now. Don't go back down there." When I asked why, he hesitated. Then he told me something the staff usually doesn't share with new hires. Back in the early 1980s, a maintenance worker died down there. He'd been checking the same electrical systems I was when the boiler exploded. His body wasn't found for nearly a week. Since then, multiple workers had quit mid-shift. All of them said they saw someone in the basement, someone tall, silent, always near the boiler room door. I quit 2 weeks later. Couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me to come back. But here's the part that still makes my stomach turn. A month after I left, I got a text from Jenna. No words, just a photo. It was the boiler room door, the same one with the black handprint. Only this time, there were two prints, side by side, and underneath, someone had scrawled in the dust, "You forgot to check the lights." To this day, that hospital stands half demolished on the edge of Columbus. Locals say at night, you can still see the basement windows flicker, one light at a time, moving slowly down the hall toward the elevator. And if you listen close enough, over the hum of the city, you might hear a voice whisper through the broken intercom lines, "Where are you going?" It was around March of 2019 when I was working the night shift at a small gas station off Highway 95, somewhere between Tampa and Las Vegas. We were a tiny, old-school station, 2 pumps, a flickering sign, a single counter, and nothing but open desert in every direction. Most nights were the same, a few truckers passing through, maybe a lost tourist asking for directions, and the occasional local picking up cigarettes or coffee. The nights were long, quiet, and uneventful until one that made me leave that job for good. It was about 1:40 a.m. I remember because the old wall clock above the coffee machine was ticking loud enough to keep me awake. I was reading a paperback mystery novel and drinking coffee that had gone bitter hours ago. Outside, everything was still, the kind of stillness you only get in the desert where even the wind seems to disappear. Then the doorbell chimed. That sharp, metallic ding cut through the silence. I looked up, and that's when I saw him. A man in a dusty gray suit was standing at the entrance. The kind of suit you'd see in an old photograph, wide tie, dull buttons, creased sleeves. He looked tired, maybe even sick. His skin was pale under the harsh fluorescent lights, and his eyes had this glassy, unfocused look. He didn't say much. He just walked to the counter, pulled a few crumpled dollar bills from his coat pocket, and said quietly, "Need gas? My family's waiting." Something in his voice felt off. It wasn't the tone, it was the delay between his words, like he was forcing each one out. I nodded, rang it up, and handed him a receipt. He didn't even glance at it. He just turned around and walked slowly back outside, his shoes dragging against the tile. I leaned over the counter, key, and looked through the glass. His car was parked by the far pump, under the flickering light. A Chevy Impala, late 1970s model, brown and silver. Rust eating through the sides. The kind of car you almost never see running anymore. Its headlights were on, and they weren't steady. They pulsed, like they were trying to stay alive. A faint haze hung around the car, like steam or smoke, but the air was cold. I could smell something strange, even from the doorway, a mix of burnt plastic, oil, and something sweet. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped outside, the cold desert air hitting my face. It was completely quiet. No cars on the highway, no wind, not even the hum of insects, only the flicker of the station's neon sign buzzing above me. As I walked closer to the car, that burnt smell got stronger. The windows were fogged up from the inside, which didn't make sense. And when I leaned forward, trying to see through the glass, I realized the fog wasn't just condensation. It was smoke. I wiped the window with my sleeve and froze. There were 3 figures in the back seat, a man, a woman, and a child, all of them sitting perfectly still. Their faces were dark blackened, almost shiny, like they'd been melted. Their clothes looked like they'd fused with their skin. It took me a few seconds to process what I was looking at. Then I noticed something worse. Wide open, teeth visible, like they were still screaming. I stumbled back, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. I wanted to call for help, to run back inside, but before I could move, the driver's door creaked open. The man in the gray suit was standing there again. He hadn't made a sound walking up. He just looked at me, calm, almost disappointed. "There, waiting," he said. "We can't leave until it's full." My throat went dry. I couldn't even answer. I just shook my head and backed away. He turned back toward the car and slowly sat inside, closing the door behind him. The headlights flickered again, and for a split second, I thought I saw flames reflecting in the windshield. Then everything went dark. The lights at the pump went out. The sign buzzed once and died, and even the sound of the generator cut off. Total silence. I ran inside the station, grabbed the phone, and dialed 911. Nothing. The line was dead. I tried my cell phone, no signal. When I looked back out the window, the car was gone, not driving away, not pulling out, just gone. The pump handle was still hanging where he'd left it. The display screen was frozen at $6.66. Locked the doors and stayed behind the counter until sunrise, staring at that empty pump through the glass. At dawn, when my relief came in, I didn't even tell him what happened. I just left. But a few hours later, I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I called the police. A deputy came by that afternoon. When I told him what I'd seen, he got quiet halfway through my story. Then he asked me to describe the car again. When I said old Chevy Impala, brown and silver, he looked down, sighed, and said, "You sure about the color?" I said, "Yeah, Why? He told me a story. Back in 1979, a family of 3, father, mother, and young son had been driving that same stretch of Highway 95. They stopped at a rest area just south of where the gas station now stands. Fire broke out in their car by the time anyone saw the smoke. It was too late. The family was found burned inside. The cause was never determined. He said people sometimes reported seeing a car matching that description late at night, always around the same time, always with 3 people inside. Usually, it was near the gas station. Then he leaned forward and asked, "You said the man told you his family was waiting?" I nodded. He swallowed hard. That's exactly what the father said, right before the car caught fire. Word for word. Quit the gas station that week. I couldn't sleep after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale man in a gray suit, his quiet voice, the smell of burnt air, the way his headlights pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Sometimes when I drive that road at night, I still catch myself glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those headlights again flickering behind me in the dark. And even now, years later, I swear, every time I pass a gas station sign in the desert and see that faint glow in the corner of my eye, I hear a voice in my head saying softly, "My family's waiting." I used to manage a small roadside motel just off Interstate 17 in northern Arizona. It wasn't much, a dozen rooms, a dusty parking lot, and a flickering neon sign that barely worked half the time. Most of our guests were travelers stopping for the night. Before heading toward Flagstaff or Phoenix, we charged cheap rates. No deposit, no ID checks, just cash and a signature. It was an easy job, mostly quiet. But one night in July of 2016, something happened that I still can't explain. Something that made me leave the motel's business for good. That evening had been slow. Only 2 rooms were booked, one by a trucker passing through, the other by an older couple who kept to themselves. I was sitting behind the reception desk, flipping through channels on the small TV when I heard the doorbell jingle. A man walked in, mid-30s maybe, wearing a dark green jacket and jeans covered in road dust. His face was pale, like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't look dangerous, but there was something uneasy in his expression, like he was both tired and scared. He placed a folded 20 on the counter and asked quietly, "You got any rooms left for the night?" I nodded and reached for the registration book. He didn't write his name, just scribbled something unreadable and asked for room 9. Specifically, that was strange because most people didn't care which room they got. But room 9, it was the last one at the far end of the row, next to the desert fence line. The light outside, it had burned out months ago, and it always felt colder there. Still, I gave him the key. He thanked me, grabbed the old brass tag, and walked out. As he left, I noticed something else. He didn't have any luggage, not even a backpack. An hour passed. The couple in room 3 turned in early. The trucker had gone to sleep, and I was just finishing paperwork when I heard it, a loud thud, like someone had dropped something heavy in the hallway. I stepped out from behind the counter and looked down the row of doors. Everything was still, except for room 9. Its door was slightly open, just a sliver of darkness showing through the crack. I called out, "Sir, you okay down there?" No answer. The desert wind carried only the soft hum of crickets and the distant hum of the highway. I started walking slowly toward the room. The closer I got, the colder the air felt. It's Arizona. It doesn't get cold at night in July, but I could see my breath, faint and white, under the hallway light. When I reached the door, I pushed it open gently. The lights were off, but the TV was on. Static, white noise, flickering shadows across the bed. The room smelled faintly of wet soil and metal, like rust and earth. "Sir?" I called again. Still nothing. Then I noticed the bedspread. It was rumpled, like someone had been sitting there, but there was no one in sight. only a single object sitting on the nightstand. The room key, old brass tag, number 9, the same one I had given him not even an hour earlier. My stomach dropped. I turned back toward the door, thinking maybe he'd gone outside, but the hallway was empty. Then I noticed something else. Footprints, faint, dusty shoe prints leading from the bed toward the bathroom. I followed them. Slowly, the bathroom door was half closed. A faint dripping sound echoed from inside. I pushed it open, and my blood ran cold. The sink faucet was dripping, but that wasn't the sound that chilled me. It was the sound coming from the tub, a slow, hollow thump every few seconds. I pulled the shower curtain back. The tub was empty, dry, cracked porcelain. Not even water inside, but the thumping continued. It was coming from the wall behind the tub. For a second, I thought maybe an animal had crawled in through the pipes, but then I heard something that made my skin crawl. A faint voice. "Don't open the door." It was a whisper, low and urgent. It came from the wall itself. I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the mat. The whisper came again, clearer this time. "Please, don't open it again." The room suddenly felt smaller, tighter, the air heavier. I bolted out the door, ran straight back to the front desk, called the sheriff's office. They said they'd send a deputy to check it out. When Deputy Sanders arrived, he listened to my story but looked skeptical. He went to room 9, walked inside, and came back, shaking his head. No static on the TV, no footprints, no sound, just a perfectly empty room. He looked at me and said, "You sure you weren't just dreaming, son?" I wasn't. I know what I saw, but he shrugged, wrote a short note in his pad, and left. I locked up early that night and tried to get some sleep in the back office. Around 2:30 a.m., the sound of the bell jolted me awake. Ding! Someone had opened the lobby door. I stumbled out, still half asleep, and froze. The key to room 9 was sitting on the counter again. No one was there. No sound. No movement. Just that old brass key lying perfectly still under the flickering light. The next morning, I checked the sign-in book. His name, or whatever he'd scribbled, was gone. Just a blank line where it had been written. That should have been the end of it. But 2 nights later, around the same time, a family checked in. A man, his wife, and their teenage daughter. They got room 9 around 3 a.m. I woke up to the daughter screaming. When I ran to the door, her father was dragging her out of the room, pale and shaking. She kept yelling that someone had been knocking beside the bathroom wall and whispering her name. When I checked, the tub faucet was running red dud, not blood, but red-brown water, thick with rust. The wall behind it was damp and cold to the touch, like something was breathing behind it. That was the night I quit, packed my stuff, left the keys, and drove to my sister's place in Phoenix before sunrise. A few weeks later, I got a call from my old coworker, Luis. He'd taken my place after I left. He sounded shaken. He told me they had to shut room 9 permanently. He said a plumber came to check the pipes after another guest complained about the smell. When they broke open the wall behind the tub, they found a body. The man had been sealed inside, judging by the condition. He'd been there for decades, mummified by the dry air. The remains were still wearing a dark green jacket. The coroner later identified him as a drifter named Elis Crow, a transient who disappeared sometime in 1981. After staying at that very same motel, he'd checked in under a false name and was never seen again. The report said he'd likely been murdered and hidden in the wall by the motel's original owner. But what they couldn't explain was how his room key kept showing up fresh, polished, and warm, as if someone had just used it. I tried to move on, but sometimes, late at night, when I pass through old motels on road trips, I can't help but glance at the last door in a row, the one where the light doesn't work, because I know, somewhere out there in one of those forgotten places, there's still a brass tag hanging on a hook with the number 9 stamped into it. And I swear, sometimes, if you listen closely enough, you can hear that faint whisper behind the wall, please. Don't open the door again. I worked night security at a small nursing home in Central Florida. It wasn't a fancy place, just a single building with a couple of wings, a front lobby, and long hallways lined with beige walls and flickering fluorescent lights. Most nights were uneventful. Residents slept, monitors beeped quietly, and the occasional visitor wandered the halls. I had been working there for nearly 2 years, and I got comfortable with the routine. I had a schedule, rounds every 30 minutes, check the emergency exits, and keep an eye on the security cameras from the small office in the back. Around 3 a.m. on a Thursday night, I was monitoring the cameras while sipping lukewarm coffee and scrolling through my phone. Everything seemed normal. Few residents moving in the hallways, nurses walking the floors, a cat sleeping by the front entrance. Then, I noticed something strange on the monitor for the East Wing. One of the cameras caught an elderly woman standing at the end of the hallway. She wasn't moving, just standing there, staring directly at the camera. I froze. The weirdest part, she wasn't supposed to be up. Most residents were in their rooms. And this woman, Mrs. Whitaker, was bedridden and under 24-hour care. I radioed the floor nurse. "Hey, is Mrs. Whitaker up?" No response. I tried again. Still nothing. I decided to check the hall myself. When I got there, the hallway was empty. No Mrs. Whitaker, no other residents, just the soft hum of the air conditioning. I checked every room along the hall. All the beds were occupied, everyone asleep. When I returned to the office, I rewound the camera footage I wanted to make. Sure, I hadn't imagined it. The footage was even stranger than I thought. The woman appeared on camera walking down the hall toward the lobby. But the time stop said 1:16 a.m. Over 2 hours before the footage even began recording. She moved slowly, deliberately, her head tilted slightly, staring straight into the camera. At one point, she passed through a closed door, the med storage closet, and vanished. I called the night nurse again when I asked about Mrs. Whitaker. She went silent. Finally, she said quietly, "She's been dead for 3 days." I stared at her, confused. She said the family had requested hospice care, and the body had been moved to the funeral home earlier that evening. I couldn't believe it. I went back to the monitor, trying to rationalize what I saw. Maybe it was a trick of the camera, a reflection in the glass, or some kind of delayed recording. But the movement was too smooth to deliberate. Over the next week, I noticed more strange activity. Every night, I'd see shadowy figures in empty rooms, residents standing in doorways that led nowhere, or glimpses of people moving through walls. Once, I watched the lobby camera, and a nurse I knew had been on break appeared walking past the reception desk. I called the office phone. She was asleep in her room. One night, around 3:40 a.m., I was walking down the East Wing to check on a resident's room when I felt it, that sudden cold that makes the hair on your arms stand up. I stopped in the middle of the hallway. All the lights were flickering. The silence was so thick, it felt like it was pressing against my chest. Then I heard it, a faint whisper, soft, almost inaudible, calling my name. "Mark." I spun around. Nothing. I radioed the front desk, voice shaking, asking if anyone else heard anything. The radio was silent. I kept moving, trying to get back to the office. When I passed the room at the end of the hall, room 12, the door was slightly ajar, and inside I could see a faint, dim light moving across the walls. I approached slowly, thinking maybe a nurse had forgotten the light on. When I peered inside, the room was empty. The light wasn't from a lamp or a bulb. It seemed to flow, a soft, glowing orb, drifting across the floor like it had weight, but no form. The orb rose slowly, hovering in the air, and for a moment, I swore I saw a face inside it, pale, light, eyes staring wide open. Then it vanished. I ran back to the office and locked the door. Checked the monitors. Everything looked normal, perfectly quiet. No orb, no woman, no movement. I stayed awake the rest of the night, clutching my coffee and checking every camera repeatedly. The following week, another security officer confirmed my suspicions. He told me he had seen similar things on the same East Wing cameras, moving along empty halls, residents appearing and disappearing at impossible times. He said he quit after a few nights because it felt like the building itself was alive. Eventually, the administration installed new cameras and reassigned staff. Transferred to a daytime position shortly after. But even now, years later, I can't shake it. Sometimes when I walk past a nursing home at night, I glance at the hallways and I swear I see a faint glow drifting past doors, moving down empty corridors. And sometimes, if you're quiet enough, you can hear her whisper, "I'm still here, waiting." I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour diner in rural Maine, just off I-95. The diner sat on a small patch of road surrounded by trees, with nothing but forest and darkness for miles. It wasn't fancy, a few booths, a counter, neon lights that flickered at times, and the smell of fried food that never seemed to leave. Most nights were slow. Occasionally, a trucker would stop for coffee, or a traveler would wander in bleary-eyed, looking for warmth. But winter nights were the worst, cold, endless, and so dark outside you could barely see your hand in front of your face. I was working a shift on December 12th, 2009. The temperature was well below freezing. Snow piled up against the windows, wind howling through the parking lot. I had been alone in the diner since midnight. Around 2:40 a.m., the door jingled. I looked up. A woman walked in. She was wearing a long red coat, boots caked in snow, her hair wet and clinging to her face. She didn't speak at first, just slid into the corner booth. I assumed she wanted coffee. I poured it and carried it over. "Sugar?" I asked. She shook her head. "Cream?" Another shake. Her eyes. I remember them clearly. They were empty, not blind, but hollow, like she had been staring at something for a very long time. I set the coffee in front of her. When I turned back, the booth was empty. I froze. I checked the diner. No one else had come in. The snow outside hadn't been disturbed. Her footprints weren't in the parking lot, but the coffee, it was still there, steaming. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I had imagined it, but then I heard it, the soft sound of boots on the floor. I turned, nothing. I asked myself if I should just leave the cup and forget it, but something made me lean closer. The smell, faint but unmistakable, of cold metal and wet earth. The next night, I was extra cautious. I kept a close eye on the front door, waited for anyone coming in around the same time, 2:40 a.m. The bell jingled again. She was back, the same long red coat, boots covered in frost, and that same empty stare. She sat in the corner booth again, as if she had never left. I poured coffee. She didn't touch it. She just stared, then noticed the hands, pale blue at the tips, not moving, but tense, like they were gripping the table, invisible. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. When I turned to grab some cream, she was gone. Not slowly, not slipping out the door. She vanished. The coffee was still there, warm. Over the next few weeks, it became a pattern. Every night, same time, same booth, same woman. Some nights, I tried to ignore her. Some nights, I stayed awake, trying to see if it was just a prank, a reflection, or a trick of my tired mind. It was real. Every night, the coffee would be left untouched. Every night, she would appear and vanish. And every night, the temperature inside the diner would drop sharply, like a freezing gust sweeping through the room. I started checking the cameras. The security feed showed her entering, sitting, and leaving every night. But when I checked the door camera, it never showed her going in or leaving. There were no footprints in the snow, no disturbance outside at all. One night, I decided to confront her. I went to the corner booth. The coffee was steaming. I waited. She appeared. As usual, I stood in front of her. "Ma'am, can I help you?" I asked. She didn't respond. The air grew colder. My breath was visible, hanging like fog. Then I saw it. The frost on her coat started spreading, slowly crawling over the table, across the floor. Reaching toward me, I stumbled back. The booth was empty again. The coffee cup remained, steaming, the most disturbing part. A few days later, the morning news reported that a woman had been found dead in her car on that same road, frozen solid, sitting in the driver's seat. The date matched perfectly, December 12th. Every year, her body had been discovered around the same time. Locals called her the Red Coat Lady. I quit that diner the next week. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I close my eyes, I see her sitting there in that corner booth, her hollow eyes staring at me, waiting. Years later, I still drive past that stretch of I-95. Sometimes, late at night, the diner's neon sign flickers, and I swear, if you look through the windows at the corner booth, you can see a long red coat, boots caked in snow, and a steaming cup of coffee, waiting for someone to sit down.